Hi everyone and welcome to a digital piano review here on the Merriam Pianos YouTube channel. It's been a little while since we did a digital, and so why not make it a Donner DDP-300. This is a brand that is slightly newer to the marketplace, found mostly in e-commerce venues such as Amazon. I've seen resellers pop up on eBay. I can see, you Google it and you'll see it quite a few spots, but I think Amazon is primarily where this does most of its selling. We have a 300 here in front of us, so we are going to walk through the piano sound, the other sounds, talk about the functionality, give you a quick insight into its action, and our overall impressions, of course. So, if you were always wondering about that model, this is a video you might want to check out. If it's the first time that you are finding us here on YouTube, thank you so much, first of all, and hit that subscribe button at any point when you're either entertained or you found this useful, or who knows, you just want to see more. We'd love to have you back. Without further ado, let's get started with the DDP-300 review right away. So here we have the DDP-300. DDP, I'm guessing, Donner Digital Piano 300. And this is one of their top models. They make a few different models, and they actually got their start in the music electronic industry making guitar accessories. And it's expanded into digital pianos, as you can see. The DDP-300 is a model that has been out, I believe, for 2 years, if I'm not mistaken. You can see it on a number of e-commerce platforms, including Amazon. It's been reviewed several times. So it was not so much that I thought that this instrument needed any extra exposure, since this piano has probably been seen by more entry-level digital piano shoppers than anything else that I've ever taken a look at on this channel. It was mostly out of curiosity, because as the top of the digital piano industry improves, so does the bottom. And so what used to be considered a pretty unappealing musical experience, buying one of the lesser expensive 88-note weighted digital pianos, that continues to improve as well. So I was really curious to see exactly where it sat in comparison to some of the other options from Yamaha, Kawai, Roland, Korg that you can get once you get closer to about the $1,000 mark, which would be about doubling or tripling the budget required to get one of these. So let's start with what it is. It is 88 notes. It is a weighted 88-note action. It is a sample-based playback system, and it is, from a feature standpoint, pretty similar to the kind of thing that you're going to get out of, say, Yamaha P-45 or Roland FP10, maybe a little below where the FP10 would be. And I guess a direct competitor to this would be something like the Casio CDP-S100, which is another instrument that I certainly am trying to get my paws on to get a review done of. Let's play it first. I always love starting with sound, because that, to me, is one of the most connective things about any instrument is the sound. We will also talk about the action, and then move on to features from there. So here we are with the Donner DDP-300 and its sound. So it's a pretty decent sample that they've used here. So there's a couple of things I can tell. It isn't individual note sampling. It sounds like it's kind of done in about 3 or 4 keys or so. So they've done some sample stretching to accommodate likely 3 or 4 keys per sample, but with the pitch adjust. It sounds like it's just a single layer, which isn't surprising for this price range. The quality of the sample that they have used is pretty good. Now I'm gonna have to get that next to a Casio at some point and see. I have a feeling the Casio is maybe a slightly more complex tone, but have to get it side by side to know for sure. Definitely it's ahead of what the Alesis is offering in sort of this entry-level range. It's definitely above kind of the, let's call it white label brands like the Rock Jam or Jammer. I don't even know. Some of these pop-up brands that you see sometimes on Amazon for Christmas seasons. So it's certainly outplaying those by a handy mile. And the dynamic control is quite good too. The left pedal effect is well calibrated as well. So that's the piano tone. The E-piano tone, again, because we're dealing with single sample layers, no bark really that you can get out of this. But they picked a pleasant sample. So it's functional, for sure. Rock organ. That's pretty good. Odd decay on the strings, even with the pedal pressed. And then bass. The instrument has a 20-watt speaker system. I'm assuming that means each side is like 10 watts apiece. Really hard to find any detailed specs on this, and that's not unusual for the price range. But whatever the specific rated wattage is, I can tell you that it's ample for whatever you'd be wanting to do with this DDP-300. I'm at about 50% volume right now, and it's doing a pretty good job of giving me a slightly softer than ideal, but I'm at half. So, you know, you turn it up to 60, 70%. not sure you'd want it or need it much louder than that if this was for personal use in an average to small size room. I think you'd be perfectly fine. So that's really all we're going to talk about with sound. I'm actually going to throw some specs up on the screen for you with this instrument. We'll be back in just a second where we're going to dive right in to the action. So they advertise this piano as having a GHS action. This is 100% not the Yamaha GHS action. It's, you know, a graded hammer standard action, and obviously Yamaha has not trademarked that acronym. It probably isn't trademarkable, but it for sure is not the Yamaha action. The Yamaha action by that title is quite a bit lighter. The hammer mechanism inside that action is a little tighter as well, yeah, it's a very different feel. This GHS action, to buck the trend in this price range, is not on the light side, it's actually quite on the heavy side. I can feel the hammer action returning. It's definitely one of the better ones in its price range that I've played for sure. Unable to tell whether it's single dual sensor, but I'm definitely going to say that this seems like it's a dual sensor given the accuracy of the dynamic range. I haven't really been able to get it to do any kind of weird spiking even when I get a little bit aggressive with this instrument. The top surface is a satin surface. It's not like a highly polished surface. It is a little grippier than you know, the ideal for me, but it's not so much so that your fingers, you know, aren't able to glide and get stuck, which can sometimes be an issue on lesser expense or lesser cost actions. Is that top white surface becomes a little too grippy, and depending on your repertoire, it can actually catch quite a bit. The repetition speed on it is pretty good. I certainly have not too many complaints there. That's going to work very well for most beginning repertoire, even into some of your intermediate repertoire for sure. You know, in a lot of ways, this reminds me of playing one of the first Roland HPs. Like if you go back, I don't know, like 15 years, this sort of has about that feel and a very similar sound. So you know, all of this is relative because of course, the price range that we're talking about. It's not competing against $2,000-$3,000 Rolands, but just musically, it's sort of, it's very similar to that. Anyway, that's our quick chat about the action on the DDP-300. We are going to be back with one last section. We're going to talk about features and then just some closing thoughts on this instrument. Thank you again for being with us. We'll be back in just a second. So the extra features and functionality on this instrument, there are a few things worth noting. One, it actually has an auxiliary audio out. It is a single stereo, so tip ring sleeve, 1/4 inch output, which is separate from the headphone jacks. And there are 2 1/4 inch headphone jack outputs. So you can run this into a recorder or stereo or whatever without having to take up your headphone jacks or defeating the local speakers. That's kind of a handy feature and pretty unusual for the price range. It also has Bluetooth MIDI, which is another unusual feature for this price range. I haven't tested it for lag, but most Bluetooth MIDI, regardless of whether it's on a really expensive instrument or a low-end instrument, tends to be totally usable, you know, low latency connection for that MIDI. So that's a cool feature as well. There is a basic onboard recorder, which you could use for, you know, simple playback and kind of hashing out some ideas, or as a practice tool. People might find that handy. We played through the 5 sounds that are on board. There are some other functionality on there. You can split the keyboard. There's a metronome function. You can transpose. So all of the kind of standardy stuff available on this instrument. So in the final conclusion, it really isn't whether I think this instrument is a good instrument for its price, because I would say on the whole, it really does provide a good experience for the price. If this was the absolute limit that you had to spend, and there's going to be situations where you just legitimately do not want or have the budget to go much above, I think this is, in most markets, ranges sort of in around the $300 or $400 range. And you're not going to want to be above that, and for that you want to be able to get something that looks like a proper digital piano. Not too many things that are going to compete with that, so it sort of has found a nice lane, and I think it's providing good value in that lane. The real question is going to be for people where if that wasn't the absolute ceiling, and if they got a lot better by spending a little bit more, would it make sense? That's where the real debate is going to be. Because you're not that far away from getting into, say, a Casio PXS 1100, not that far away from hitting a Roland FP10. You're right in the same range as, say, a Yamaha P-45. Casio has got a couple of really strong options in their CDP series, even the CDP-S100, where you're getting 600 sounds. The quality of those sounds are great. The quality action is really great. So, I mean, I get that, like most things, you pay more money and you're going to get better. But at this particular stage, it really is deciding whether a few extra $100 is worth getting into a piano where your action and the quality of sound might last you through the several years of lessons, and potentially, as a hobby player, be really satisfying for the full length that you would need that instrument. Or is this going to be sufficient with the action that's just a little heavier than I would say is typical, but still is going to help build some muscle tone? I mean, that's not a bad thing, but it's not quite as responsive, physically responsive, as you might get on some of those other ones. Or whether the tone is ever going to become somewhat limiting. If you're taking classical, for example, to start with, zero problems here at all. Once you get into really trying to develop your tone and your touch, and your teacher's starting to talk to you about, oh, use your back, and you have no idea what they're talking about, well, that's when you need an instrument that can really start to bring the nuance out, where some of those finer muscle controls have an influence. So there you go. There's our thoughts on the DDP-300 from Donner. Thank you so much for checking us out here on YouTube. It's the first time that you've done so. We would really appreciate if you hit that subscribe button and hit the notification bell as well, because we'd love to have you back as a regular viewer. Whether you're in the market for a piano or not, or you just love checking this kind of stuff out, which certainly I'm do that with all kinds of channels on YouTube myself. My name is Stu Harrison, and thank you so much for watching. We'll see you again soon.